Kia ora koutou katoa, welcome to No Boundaries on a golden day for New Zealand cricket. Hope you are all absolutely buzzing after what has been a wonderful 24 hours. The White Ferns, well, they are the T20 World Champions, and the Black Caps, how good. Their first test win in India since 1988. We are going to start though with the White Ferns with my wonderful panel here, Mitch McCledigan, former Black Cap, and Mike Hesson, former Black Caps coach. Great to have you both with us on what is really an historic day. And Mitch, I'll just start with you. Your initial reaction to that White Ferns win?
Phenomenal. It really was phenomenal, and for more reasons than just one. Obviously, winning the World Cup, what an achievement, but right from the start of the tournament, nobody gave them a shot, myself included. I think if you said that at the start of the tournament the White Ferns were going to win, I did sense to your face, say you're a liar, because there was no chance. They probably weren't even a starter's chance, to be fair. And you saw that in the way Ben Sawyers was talking pre-tournament. He was saying their approach to this tournament was going to be taking each game as a one-off, and if they can win as many one-offs as possible, then they're a chance of progressing to the semi-finals and obviously trying to challenge for that cup. So, look, it was a phenomenal performance. Amelia Kerr led that throughout the tournament, player of the tournament, player of the final tonight, but there was a lot of great contributions throughout that, and I think one of the biggest performances for mine was looking at Brooke Halliday the last two games. I think the 38 off 28 tonight was significant. When Amelia Kerr was really struggling, she came in and gave that innings some oomph, some emphasis, and also in the semi-final, her 18 off 9 actually got them to a score which was a little bit too far out of the reach of the West Indies.
When you look at the lead-in to this tournament, yes, 10 losses, 10 straight losses going into it. How did they turn that around to now be world champs?
Well, just as Mitch said, I think they didn't get too far ahead of themselves. I mean, the biggest challenge was going to be getting out of that pool. I mean, when the pools came out, you've got India, Australia, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, along with New Zealand in that pool. Two of the top favourites. India and Australia were two of the top favourites to win that World Cup. And the fact that New Zealand dominated India in that first game, and we have talked about that previously, what an incredible performance that was in terms of the fact they really took the game on. And that set up their World Cup. Then they just had to be clinical against the likes of Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and they were. And then on the other side of the draw, you had England got knocked out. They were going to be probably the other favourite team. They got knocked out by the West Indies. And then it got to a point where, thankfully, both of those sides, both the West Indies and South Africa, like chasing. And I think we talked about New Zealand love the fact they can bat first, get a score on the board, and then bring all those spinners into the game. And to be fair, New Zealand's bowling lineup, those three spinners, even Carson, just a young player, that the fact you get to bowl all those tough overs, Fran Jonas and Amelia Kerr, along with Rosemary Mair, who, was injured for a year heading up to this World Cup, and Ben Sawyer made that change to bring her in, and she was absolutely outstanding. And Leah Tahuhu, one of the three older players along with Faith and Sophie Devine to I guess, maybe not finish their career on high, but certainly this is going to be a huge highlight for all three of them. The amount of World Cups they've been to. I had a little tear in my eye this morning as well, just looking at how much it meant to them and the amount of work they've put in to get to this point. It's an exciting time for them.
Yes, you are not the only one with a tear in your eye. I can absolutely promise you that. I'll touch on those now. These are Sophie Devine's words, not mine. The grandmas in the group. So, Sophie, Susie Bates, Leah Tahuhu. You think what they have gone through together, the loss in the final in 2010 for Leah Tahuhu. Remember, she lost her central contract a couple of years ago. It would have been very easy for her to walk away from cricket. What does it say about that group that they were willing to persist to this point, Mitch, and now get the rewards?
Well, obviously a lot of longevity for those three in particular, a lot of perseverance. They spoke openly about the challenges over the last couple of years after the last T20 World Cup, how they have struggled as a side. Those performances, I think the last 16 games, they've only won 5. Against Australia and England, their record's been abysmal. So some really tough times and some soul searching. But look, I think to come out the other side, particularly for those two, Sophie Devine and Susie Bates, they've had the upset of those two runner-up performances in T20 World Cups in the past, and it's really nice that they get to sign off as World Cup winners if this is going to be their last fixture. But I think for them it's really nice as well from a New Zealand cricket perspective, is that they haven't given up in terms of they could look at their own careers as them as individuals and their own performances, but what they've really looked to do is really build this next generation of young white Ferns coming through the setup. And I think that a lot of the hard work has gone in from them along with the coaching staff to get these girls to a point where they can perform and also produce the results that we've seen throughout this tournament.
From a playing perspective, Mitch, would you be tempted to hang up the boots, so to speak, if you were in their shoes?
Oh, well, look, I tell you what, you probably wouldn't be far away because this game doesn't give you a lot of opportunities to go out on top. And, you know, if you're thinking about it in the next year or so, this would probably be a great opportunity.
You look at those youngsters, and Mike, I'll come back to you because, like you say, your Eden Carson, your Fran Jonas, even your Izzy Gaze, your Georgia Plummer, what we have seen that I think has been really encouraging this tournament are those names that are not the ones we're necessarily familiar with being able to come through. Does that hold the future of the women's game in really good stead, Mike?
Yeah, look, it certainly does. I mean, it was only a matter of 3 weeks ago we talked about Georgia Plummer, the fact that they need to stick with it. You know, she basically, up until the last game against Australia, Georgia Plummer, you know, just hadn't basically found her feet at the international level. But there's plenty of skill there. And the fact that she was able to get 50 in that last game against Australia, you can see the confidence levels lift. And the fact the opening partnership with Susie Bates and Georgia Plummer basically set New Zealand up throughout that tournament. And to have a young player like Georgia Plummer be the highest run scorer for New Zealand in a World Cup, having been fighting for a spot beforehand, is a fantastic story. And Izzy Gaze's wicketkeeping and the fact she, as a finisher, was exceptional. You know, on against three spinners that we've talked about. So really pleased with those two. You know, Mitch has already talked about Brooke Halliday, the cameos that played, you know, during tough times and took the pressure off the likes of Amelia Kerr to have to up the rate. You know, those can't be underestimated. So, and the role of those older players to help, you know, drive them to this point, help, you know, basically that no better people to learn about off and during games, during pressure moments than those three. And it is an exciting time. And there's plenty in the, you know, like Molly Penfold is a really promising seamer as well. You know, there are a lot of promising signs, and I think Ben Sawyer deserves plenty of credit in terms of sticking with that group of players and providing them over the last 12 months a lot of playing opportunities, albeit in some losses. But they've had some real consistent game time and some opportunities to hopefully get to this point. And, you know, hats off to that coaching group along with the playing group. And, you know, they get what they deserve, an outstanding performance and indeed a World Cup.
Do you want to give some props to Craig McMillan as well, who, of course, came in as the assistant coach for that team 6 odd months ago?
I don't want to give him too much, but he's obviously done something. I actually thought the fielding was exceptional, you know, and the one thing that Macca will bring to training is that intensity that he expects at fielding. So certainly that's been lifted as well, and I'm sure he's added a huge amount to that coaching group as well.
And Mitch, just very quickly before we do move on, is this the shot in the arm that women's cricket needs in this country?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think it shows that the game's here to stay on the women's side of the format. So I think it's really positive. And what you need as a generation coming up, you need some heroes to look up to. And yes, this generation who's now playing with Susie Bates and Sophie Devine have looked up to them. But now you've got the likes of Georgia Plummer, you've got your Brooke Hallidays, you've got obviously your Amelia Kerrs and your Rosemary Mayers there for the younger generation to look up to now as well.
Right, well, let's turn our attention now to the Black Caps, shall we? As we mentioned earlier, they secured their first Test win in India since 1988. Now, guys, I don't want to brag about the kind of age situation here, but I was not born the last time the Black Caps won a Test in India. This is how rare it is. It's just the third time ever. The first was in 1969. There's a lot to unpack, but first of all, here's what will this mean to this group?
I'll give them a huge amount of confidence. I mean, once again, it's been a challenging time, you know, for the Black Caps. The last 4 or 5 Test matches, you know, struggled in Sri Lanka, and to go to take on the World Test Championship leaders in India, 18 straight wins. You know, they are an 18 straight win series India have had in their own country. Only the third country ever to win a Test match in India. You know, it is an incredibly tough place to go. And to do it on the back of that tour to Sri Lanka, to do it without Kane Williamson, is an incredible effort. And that will give a huge amount of confidence to the group, Tom Latham, first Test match in charge officially, rather than just doing a caretaker role. And just so many players stood out. I mean, Rutger Ravindra quite rightfully should get all the plaudits, and I'm sure we'll talk about him. But that bowling group, Will O'Rourke stepped up again. Matt Henry did what he's been doing the last 18 months. So many great signs, and Will Young to have to step into those sizable boots of Kane Williamson and get 48 not out in the last innings in very tough conditions. That first sort of 10, 11 overs from Bumrah and Siraj was a really fine effort. So, they should enjoy a couple of days celebration before the next one, that's for sure.
We will go into all of those players shortly, but first of all, I actually, Mitch, want to take you back to the toss because obviously India, you would think, would be very familiar with the conditions in Bengaluru. It is their home ground, yet they win the toss. They choose to bat. We all know what happens after that. Why would they do that? Why did they read it so poorly?
Look, I don't know if they read it poorly. I think what they tried to do was read what they wanted to read out of the wicket. The conversations were around underneath. They thought it was a little bit dry, and they know New Zealand are a dangerous side when it comes to this format of the game. They've got some superstars of the Test cricket format, and they would have been able to try to negate the batting of New Zealand. And New Zealand historically in Asia have been one of the worst batting units against spin. They've averaged less than 23. The only team in Test match cricket who's worse than them in the subcontinent is the West Indies. So that kind of probably would have been at the forefront of their analysis of New Zealand as a side, and they would have been looking for reasons to play Kuldeep, to play Ashwin and to play Jadeja together, because they would have wanted to make sure they had the resources to be able to negate the strength of the New Zealand batting. So they were looking for reasons to win the toss and bat first. Unfortunately, in that situation, they should have maybe just taken that pill and actually said, well, actually the conditions, if we win the toss, are going to be conducive for seam, and we probably needed to bowl first and change the makeup of our side accordingly.
I'll just stick with you for a second as well, because I do want to talk about the New Zealand bowlers as a former bowler yourself. What did you like about what Matt Henry and Will O'Rourke particularly were getting right in India's first innings?
Well, just the fact that Matt Henry was on the team sheet, first and foremost.
Helps. It helps.
It really helps. Maybe a couple of Test matches too late. He was phenomenal. He really was. In those conditions where it's a little bit sticky, when you saw the Hoover, they go over the pitch before the game, you saw Tim Southey's scratch marks and you saw the wicket look sticky, you knew Matt Henry was going to be right in the game. And it's one thing getting the conditions in your favour for the ball to move around, but it's also you've got to be able to execute. And I thought the areas that Matt Henry, Tim Southey, Will O'Rourke hit early in that first hour were phenomenal. They didn't give too many balls. They were back of a length set up to be hit square of the wicket. They really made Jaiswal, Raj Sharma, Virat Kohli play every delivery. So I thought they were impressive from the outset in those conditions.
In saying that, Hester, did it surprise you India's inability to adapt in that first innings?
Look, not really. I think the fact that it actually seemed sharply, with a sharp bounce from the likes of Will O'Rourke, that certainly played a part. And I think that would have filtered through the dressing room in terms of that sharp nip. Often a lot of the Indians play beside the ball. So when you have that and the ball seams and bounces, then obviously the slips come into play. But, I mean, I do go back to the toss, and I also go back to the forecast. I mean, the forecast throughout the whole Test match was rain, was showers throughout. So, I mean, for me, it was an era not only to bat first, but the side. I mean, Outclassed should have played that Test match ahead of Kuldeep. I mean, they had plenty of spin. Ashwin and Jadeja can bowl truckloads of over. So they needed somebody that, if they had opportunity, the covers were always going to come on and off. They're always going to be sweating throughout the Test, even whether it was the first day or the fourth. And we saw even the fifth day it was nipping around plenty, and India would have loved that extra seamer. So I think there's no doubt that they made an error there. And Rohit Sharma, after the first day, acknowledged that. But it was the flow-on effects that they left themselves so short from a bowling point of view to only have the two seamers. But yeah, I mean, once the ball started to nip around, Matt Henry is an absolute ideal foil for those conditions. I mean, he is immaculate in his lengths. And the fact his lengths are so good, he bowls onto a handkerchief, and the fact that he can get it to just nibble both ways, bring the stumps into play, he was just exceptional. And Will O'Rourke provides that point of difference. So all in all, just a really fine performance. Set the Test up, and then obviously we'll talk about the flow on from the batting point of view in a moment.
Why don't we talk about the flow on now, since you've brought it up? Why don't we just segue straight into that, and particularly that man you mentioned just before, he's Rachin Ravindra. Now, I do feel like we have been waxing lyrical about him since he walked out and played for the Black Caps for the very first time, but that is because he has given us every reason to. Mitch, when you look at a player like Rachin, does part of you just sit there and go, wow, the future is good?
Well, absolutely. You've got to. When you see someone as talented as Rachin Ravindra, I just think his ability against spin to use the depth of the crease, he knows the areas that he wants to hit. He also gives himself quite a bit of room. And historically, I think New Zealanders have been scared of giving up their stumps and knock backing their ability to access the offside. And that's probably one of the strengths of Rachin Ravindra's play against spin, is being able to hit through extra cover, be able to hit through point and make the bowlers have to bowl straighter and take the stumps out of play eventually. So I think the way he goes about it is a really good example for young cricketers to watch. And I think his composure under pressure has been awesome. The ability to even build that partnership with Tim Southee at the end of that innings was significant. That 137-run partnership was probably the making of the win for that Test match. You know, if New Zealand were chasing 200 in the last innings there instead of 107, that's a different game. And his ability to be able to obviously talk Tim Southee through that partnership, give him the ability to play his shots as well, but also rein him in was significant. Tim Southee, that's the second most amount of balls that he's faced in Test cricket since 2011. In fact, was the most amount of balls he faced against Pakistan and Hamilton. So what a moment for him to step up as well and to stick with Rachin in that partnership.
Yep, absolutely remarkable. Hess, for you, is there any area of Rachin's game that still needs improving, or at the moment is his progression just right on track?
Oh, look, I think I watch in awe, to be fair. I mean, his footwork is exceptional. You know, Mitch talked about the depth of the crease, but when he plays the seamers, you know, he moves late. He's therefore able to hit the ball late. Doesn't block himself off from a feet perspective, so he can hit both sides. You just see the way he started the other day. You know, New Zealand are chasing a small score. It's tough. Conway's got out. You know, first ball, gets in a great position and lays it off behind point. Then gets one straight where he clips through the onside for 4. And you just see the whole changing room just relax. And that's what class players do. You know, they go out there and regardless of the situation, they play the ball on its merits. And that's exactly what Rachin does. And he hits into the spin, which Mitch talked about. So, you know, the old adage of always playing with the spin, you talk to any great Indian player, they hit into the spin. And that's a very different mindset than what we've had previously. And then you also see the other guys who are sweeping and reversing. You add those to what New Zealand already have, and you've got a far better equipped batting lineup than what we have previously.
And one of the players that we've probably had a little bit of angst about lately is Devon Conway. Do you feel like he's played his way, or have you seen enough from him to be convinced he's getting back into form with the back end of his second innings performance in Sri Lanka and then in India as well?
Yeah, without doubt. You know, once again, he's not moving too much. I mean, we talk about Rachin's footwork. The good thing about Devon is that he doesn't move too much, so he doesn't close himself off from a feet perspective. So he's just got beautiful hands. You know when he's driving the ball through the offside and beating extra cover that he's in a good position. And he did that off both Bumrah, he did that off Siraj early, and got New Zealand 91 off 105 balls in that first innings after you bowled a side out 46 is exactly what New Zealand needed. They didn't need someone to just hold up an end and create a partnership. They needed someone to move the game forward. And that's when Devon Conway's at his best. And in the second innings, he really absorbed a huge amount of pressure. And by the time he got out, he pretty much blunted that Bumrah attack. He got out pretty much in Bumrah's last over. So Conway, we knew without Kane Williamson was going to be an absolute critical member of the side in this Test series, and he no doubt will be. And it's nice to see him in some good touch.
We will move on to what the Black Caps now need to look forward to. And first of all, Mitch, I'm going to start with you because I want to highlight Sarfraz Khan for India, 150 in India's second innings. From a bowling perspective, how would you come at him now? Good luck.
Yeah, you just hope he makes a mistake early, right? Like he's a phenomenal player. He plays aggressively. He does this for fun domestically. The amount of 4 or 5 200s in domestic cricket. So when he goes big, when he gets 100, he gets a big 100. And, even to get him out for 150, Saudi was significant at the time. So, look, he's a quality player. We're going to see a lot more of him in Test match cricket for India. The challenge is going to be where does Shubman Gill fit back into the side? Do they move? Because Sarfaraz has to stay there now. And I'm looking at that second innings from India and I go, okay, yep, there are a few concerns. Is that if we do get on a good wicket that is turning and the seamers are negated a little bit, how are we going to break those partnerships? Do we use Will O'Rourke in smaller spells? And he really is that impact player and you've got to manage him a little bit better. And the other seamers are going to have to bowl longer spells to be able to allow him to be used in that role, because the way India batted in that second innings showed ominous signs for the rest of the series.
He's moving on to Pune for the second test later in the week. Would you be making any changes to the New Zealand lineup?
No, look, I wouldn't. I mean, with Ben Sears not there, I think that lineup is spot on. You've got the option. Obviously, Michael Brace was gone home anyway, so each Sodhi comes in. But I wouldn't change that lineup. There's always a cross breeze at Pune, so the ball will swing. So therefore, Tim Southee will still be able to play an important part there, and that allows Will O'Rourke to bowl first change. And with the SG ball, the seam still stays very pronounced, so he's still able to do a good role there. Ajaz, that looks like they're going to take on Ajaz, which I don't think is a bad thing. He's going to have to do a containing role there at times. And if, as Mitch said, if that middle order gets underway, we've got to try and find some defensive ways of being able to control them. And I was pleased the way Glenn Phillips, he just loves getting in the battle, doesn't he, with the ball. So I think it's a good bowling attack, and I don't see any change. I don't see Kane Williamson rushing over there anytime soon, even though I'm sure New Zealand would love to see him there.
I actually want to pick up on something you said there, but first of all, Mitch, what about for you? Would you stick with three seamers?
Yeah, it's a tough one because after that performance, you're going to see a very spin-friendly wicket, and Ish Sodhi might be in consideration instead of Southee, but Hess is right to allude to that there is a cross breeze at Pune, so it does bring swing into play. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think maybe if they did turn up to Pune and Michael Bracewell was still in the country, then I think they might consider playing him as another spinner. But I think with Ish or Southee being the options, I think they're probably going to stick with Southee.
What I wanted to pick up with Hess before was the Kane Williamson factor. You say he's probably not rushing in at the moment, but in this hypothetical scenario in which he potentially is, what do you do then? Does Will Young get left out even after his performance, Hess?
Oh, look, he would, yes. I mean, I don't think you would make any changes. I mean, Will, unfortunately, that's Will's role at the moment, is to fill in somewhere in that top 3 or 4 when an opportunity arises, and he's certainly increasing his credentials, and the innings yesterday would have helped significantly. But I mean, Kane Williamson's got to come in. There's no one else in that lineup that doesn't deserve to be there. I mean, Daryl Mitchell's been a huge player for New Zealand the last couple of years, albeit he hasn't been in vintage touch recently. But the one thing the New Zealand selectors have been is consistent. But as I said, it probably gives New Zealand confidence that they don't need to rush Kane Williamson back, albeit they would love to have him there. But if he's only at 75%, I think they would want to have a whole season out of him rather than potentially risk him for a one-off test.
Mitch, your prediction for how things might go in Pune?
Oh, be confident, eh? Let's say 2-0.
Are you daring to dream, Yes? Are you daring to dream of a Black Caps series win in India?
Oh, absolutely, I am. I hope. I think 2 draws would be a tremendous effort from New Zealand. I just think the way India play, I think there's always going to be a result. They sort of take the game on. They don't let the game drift. But I think I was really pleasantly surprised the way the batting order performed, and that shows us, some real confidence, or should give us some real confidence heading into a couple of being used. Sure, they might be spin friendly, but they're also good batting surfaces if you get yourself in on.
Oh, well, absolutely cannot wait for the second test now, Mike. Here's Mitch McClenaghan. Thank you both so very much for your time and for your insights as ever. That is all we have time for, though, here on No Boundaries. Tell you what, get ready to be seated in front of that TV, though, from Thursday. Test 2 starts in Pune. Can the Black Caps wrap up a series win? Can you even believe that we're saying that in India? We will find out. Thanks for joining us.